that Bradley, Lieutenant John DiGiulio, now Captain John DiGiulio, promoted since, and he describes wreaking almost biblical destruction on one whole block, blowing up every single thing he saw. And he said he was able to do this because God was on his side and because he'd been spiritually armored by watching Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, and that he thanked his chaplain for preparing him for that kind of spiritual battle in the streets of Iraq.
Mikey Weinstein, Air Force veteran, founder of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. Talk about how common this is, and this videotape, what is your understanding of it and how you experienced this in the military, if you did?
Well, Amy, there's a couple things. The first is that everyone remembers Eisenhower's famous farewell speech, which was warning America of the dangers of a military-industrial complex. What we're really faced with here is a fundamentalist Christian, parachurch military, corporate proselytizing complex. A few months ago, a four-star general, a commander in the U.S. military, I won't give his exact name, but commands hundreds of thousands of troops, asked me, how bad is it, Mikey? And I'll tell your viewers today, and I'll show them exactly what I did. I said, General, hold your pen 6.5 inches above your desk. Now drop it, as I've just dropped that pen. I asked him why it dropped. And he said, what do you mean? I said, why did it drop? He said, well, gravity. That is how bad this is. It is that ubiquitous. It is in the very particulate of the technologically most lethal organization ever created by humankind, which is our U.S. military. It's everywhere. We're about 2 inches away, from a fundamentalist, Christian America through our U.S. military. I've come from a conservative military Republican family with 3 generations of military academy graduates. 3 of my kids have graduated from the Air Force Academy. The only journalist that has grasped this, moved into the mainstream media has been Jeff Sharlet, and he was incredibly, skeptical when we first started talking a couple of years ago. And I beg everybody out there to at least just do 2 things. Read Jeff's book. It's more than 10 pages, so you actually have to read it. The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism, at the Heart of American Power or Empire, whatever you want to say. And then the Harpers cover story by Jeff. It's very incontrovertible. What you saw in that, what Al Jazeera released, is nothing new. We've been talking about it forever, but there are hundreds of thousands of translated into Arabic, Pashto, Dari, biblical tracts, Bibles, coins. There are so many parachurch organizations, the Worldwide Military Baptist Missions, the Soldiers Bibles Ministry, the Campus Crusades military ministries. You can't count them all. This is how bad it is. And, docile and supine America needs to wake up, because what we're doing, we look exactly like the Crusaders of 1096 to the Iraqis and now the Afghans. And that's all there is to it, Amy.
Mikey Weinstein, tell us what the Christian Embassy video is.
This was first written about by Jeff in, I think it was 2006, wasn't it, Jeff? In an article in Harpers that came out. And we took a look at this, and I was astonished. I remember it was Thanksgiving Day, and I was trying to find a way to stay out of the kitchen so I wouldn't have to help with the meal. I was reading Jeff's story, and this thing blew up in my mind. I couldn't believe what I saw. This was a group of senior Pentagon officials, some of them like Pete Guerin, who's currently the Secretary of the Army, a number of generals and other folks that were in uniform being filmed in the Pentagon, and they were pushing the mission of this extreme right-wing fundamentalist Christian organization called the Christian Embassy. We held a press conference at the National Press Club on December 11th, I think it was 2006, demanded that the brand new secretary, Gates, had taken over for Rumsfeld, that he conduct an investigation, and the DOD IG came back, and earlier in Democracy Now! Today, we saw what one of the DOD IG reports talked about with regard to those 75 senior military officials that were trying to sell the validity of invading Iraq. And that report came back and faulted 7 of the senior officials for clearly crossing the line, not constitutionally, but essentially for wearing their Halloween costumes, their uniforms at the wrong time. And most of them have since been promoted. And what generally happens when we catch the military desecrating the Constitution, which is pretty much every couple of hours, is that they stretch the crime scene tape. They say move on, move one. Their code 1 is it didn't happen. Code 2 is it's an isolated incident. Code 3, it was taken out of context. And to Colonel Julian, who was too much of a coward to come on Democracy Now! Today, when he says we have a war to fight, well, unfortunately, the war seems to be between fundamentalist Christians and the Constitution. What I would say to him is what Martin Luther King said, which is, in the end, Colonel Julian and Pentagon, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And there comes a time when silence becomes betrayal. And our United States military, in the main, is betraying the oath it took to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, not a particular weaponized gospel perspective of Jesus Christ, of which Jeff speaks about and has written about for many years.
Jeff Sharlet, talk about the transformation of military culture. You do it very well, talking from World War II to now. If you could briefly tell us how it has changed.
Yeah, you can almost tell the story through one organization, Officers Christian Fellowship, which began in the World War II era. It was just what it sounds like, a fellowship of officers, mostly evangelical and conservative Christians, and it was fine. It was officers who wanted to get together and share their faith, and that's why we have the First Amendment, so they can do that. Things started changing. After Vietnam, you stopped seeing a lot of liberal chaplains from the liberal Christian denominations. They didn't want to serve in the military anymore. It really accelerated under Ronald Reagan, who took away all the restrictions and regulations that ensured when you saw a chaplain in the military, it really was a little bit like Father Mulcahy. Father Mulcahy in MASH is Catholic, but of course he can help and minister to everybody. He's trained to do that. Reagan wiped that out so that the chaplain corps became predominantly fundamentalist. Some chaplains estimate today it's about 80% fundamentalist. And then things really picked up after 9/11 when this group, Officers Christian Fellowship, started seeing America's conflicts as what they described as spiritual war. And what's really frightening is they describe it as a spiritual conflict between good and evil. They describe Mikey Weinstein as satanic. This show would be satanic from their perspective. And that's the problem. They see, not only do they see those whom they're fighting overseas as part of the opposition, but they see even those within the military who are not a part of their movement as, at best, unwitting tools of Satan. I mean, this sounds like loony stuff, but then you look at the size of the organization, it's 15,000 members. It's growing at 3% a year. It's represented on 80% of military installations around the world. And you see really the fruition of a very long campaign that predates George Bush to view the military as what missionaries call a mission field, not a branch of government, but as a place to go and harvest souls. And they've been successful now. And as Mikey Weinstein says, they're so dominant within the military that they have become, in some ways, the mainstream rather than the fringe.
Jeff, we only have a minute, but President Bush was close to the religious right. Obama isn't as close to the religious right. Will this change the military? And what about his associations with Rick Warren, who was, who gave one of the prayers at the inauguration?
Well, if things go as planned, a general named Mike Gould is about to take over at the Air Force Academy, where Mikey Weinstein has been fighting for years for First Amendment freedoms. Mike Gould, in my story I report, when he was at the Pentagon, he forced on his subordinates Rick Warren's teachings. Regardless of the subordinates' religions, he said, you need to look at Rick Warren. That guy's about to be promoted under Obama. No one thinks Obama shares these points of view. I think there was some hope when he came in, and I think Mikey had hoped that there would be some real action, and instead we see the same old guys being held over and in many cases even promoted, and it seems that Obama has taken a hands-off approach to this problem and is just ignoring it, and that's only going to allow the movement to grow stronger.
Mikey Weinstein, 10 seconds.
I would say that this is not a fight between Christianity and Judaism or between Christianity and Islam. It's not a political spectrum left or right issue. It's a constitutional right and wrong issue, and that's what most of our military has forgotten or is deliberately, willingly, forgetting.
I want to thank you both for being with us. Mikey Weinstein, Air Force veteran. His book is With God on Our Side. And I want to thank Jeff Sharlet, who's a cover story of Harpers Magazine, author of the book The Family. That does it for our show. Thanks to the two PBS stations. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.